This time around, we're going to take a look at the top 5 security settings that you not only need to know, but you need to switch on now in Microsoft 365. So stay with me. You never know. You might learn something. Greetings everyone, Andy Malone, Microsoft MVP, as well as a Microsoft Certified Trainer. Welcome to the channel. I really appreciate you stopping by. Just before I get started, I just wanted to address a couple of comments that I got this week on my YouTube channel. Number one, Andy, you're a Microsoft MVP. I think it's hilarious that you use a Mac. Really? Come on. Are we past that? Seriously? Look, guys, I'm a Mac user. Yes, I'm an Apple device. I've got Apple everywhere, okay? But I love Microsoft. I'm a passionate Microsoft MVP in Microsoft 365, Azure Active Directory, and cloud security. And it's because it's available on every device, okay? Just wanted to get that out of the way. Okay, so the second comment that I sometimes get is, Andy, your videos are in low res. This is not true. YouTube always, doesn't matter what you upload, YouTube always seems to render my videos in low res, then in HD, and then finally in 4K, which is what they're recorded in. So just be a little bit patient sometimes when, especially if you're one of the first people to check out the video. If it's not great on your 77-inch TV, then just give it kind of, an hour, come back and check it out again. Okay. So for this week's episode, what I thought I would do is take a look at what I think are the top 5 features in Microsoft security in terms of Microsoft 365 that you must switch on. And not only switch on, but you also need to understand as well. So we're going to take a little bit of time taking a look at those specific features. Now, I've got to be honest with you, there are literally hundreds of security features. So what I think are, out of the box, these are things that you really need to switch on. So stick with me because you will definitely learn something here. Now, if you've not subscribed to the channel, I would really appreciate you clicking up there on the subscribe button, ringing that bell so that you don't miss out on future videos. And as always, I love your comments, questions and feedback, so please just get them down below there. And of course, if you've got any session suggestions for the future, then by all means go ahead and let me know what you think. Just one thing, as always, I time code all of my sessions, so feel free to jump in and out as you will. And I've also included demos in everything here as well. So I think without any more jibber jabber, I think it's time for some demos, don't you? So I want to kick off my demo here in Microsoft 365, and we're going to go down into the Admin Center. Now from the Admin Center, we're going to go and take a look at the Security and Compliance area. So I'm going to click into Security, and I want to show you, this is my number 5. So number 5 is Threat Policies and something called the Configuration Analyzer. Now, if you've not looked at the Security Center for quite some time, there have been quite a lot of changes here. Now, I'd just like to point out, by the way, that some of the features that I'm showing you here are only available in the E5 subscription. But what I've tried to do with my top 5 is I've tried to look at features that will be available in a vast majority of tenants. So hopefully you'll find these first of all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here to the Admin Center, and in the past I've done sessions on this. Again, it's been newly named. It's now called the Microsoft 365 Defender, and the idea is that Microsoft have lots of these different security products that what they're essentially trying to do is bring them under a single brand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to policies and rules, and the threat policies you can find here in the admin center. Now, you have got something called the anti-phishing, the anti-spam, and the anti-malware policies. Now, these are basically something called EOP, Exchange Online Protection. Now, irrespective of the version of Microsoft 365 that you have, whether it be business, whether it be enterprise, typically you will get all of these features. All right. So you can go in and you can configure anti-malware policies, antivirus policies. You definitely want to go in and have a look at that. All right. Now, just a little tip from Andy is when you go in and you set this up, very important that from your settings and domains area, when you're setting up your custom domain name, which I'm not in this case, during the configuration of this DNS domain, it will ask you, do you want to include DNS records for things like security? So definitely make sure that you include your security DNS records. Otherwise, your clients will not know where to go for those. And they're all included in here. And that's actually taken care when you do the actual setup. Now, you can see out of the box, Microsoft provides you with a fairly robust set of default settings. Of course, you can go in, you can edit any of these features if you want to. You can edit the protection settings and you can customize this if you want to. But the key thing is not really that it's here. The fact is that you need to switch it on and make sure that you've configured it correctly. Now, if I just go back to threat policies, the two options here that you don't get with the standard subscriptions are the safe attachments and safe links. Now, both of these I have covered in Defender for 365 in a video that I've done in the past. And what I'll do is I'll include that link to the video in the description here, okay? So you can go and check that out. But again, safe attachments and safe web links, very, very useful. Now, something that's starting to creep in to Microsoft 365, which I love. So if you're not sure whether you've configured these correctly, then definitely go into the configuration analyzer. And what this does is it goes ahead and it does exactly as it says on the tin. It will go off and it will have a look at your settings. So it looks at all the different configuration settings, see anti-phishing, anti-spam, and it's pulling out all of these rules. And you can see it's giving you a score and it will say, hey, you know, do you want to improve this? So if you want to, and it's making some recommendations. So these are all recommendations that you can actually do in order to improve your score. Now, of course, as well as the standard recommendations, there are also some stricter options as well. And the stricter options, you know, they're as it says on the tin, a lot stricter. So again, to implement these rules, I can just simply click onto this, click into the message here, and it tells you a little bit about the actual rule, what type of rule it is. And it says, hey, do you want to go ahead and apply this recommendation? Okay, now you can also view the policy here. And like I said, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to say that's fine. I'm happy with that recommendation. Go ahead and do that. Now, what we also have here is something called configuration drift. So what that means is if any administrators have made changes away from the standard configuration, or they've maybe lowered some configuration settings, you would get those here. And you can see in my example, I don't have anything. So like I said, definitely check out the configuration analyzer, really powerful feature, and it makes some great recommendations on how to improve your security. Just to mention, by the way, of course, as with all of these tools, if you click on Learn More, it will actually take you through to docs.microsoft.com and you can read all about it. So for my number 4 option, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. I'm going to come into Organizational Settings, and I'm going to go into something called Security and Privacy. Now here, this is a relatively new feature. It's called Privileged Access. Now in the past, you may have wanted to give users in your organization admin access or admin control, and I've talked at length about this in previous videos. And it's called RBAC, Role-Based Admin Control. This is where you can assign or elevate users' permissions to become an admin. So for example, if I wanted John to be a Teams administrator or Peter to be an Exchange administrator and so on. Well, what this feature does is this is a slightly more granularized version of that tool, because what you can do here is once you switch it on, you can basically say, hey, I'm going to allow privileged access not just to roles, but also specific and individual tasks. Now, I'm going to search for a group that I can use as an approval group, and you can see here I've got a group called my Oslo head office. Now if you want to know more about this feature, then check out the link here. That will take you through to docs.microsoft.com, but essentially it provides a way for people in your organization to perform tasks that otherwise would require a higher level of permission or an admin role. So this is a fantastic way of saying, hey, you know, John just wants to do this particular task and so on. So once you've switched that feature on, I can now go in and create some policies and requests. So in here, I'm going to click on request access, and you can see it can be based on an individual task, an individual role, or you can give them a role group. Now, so if I chose a role group, you can see that there is only one product at the moment. This will be expanded on in future versions. But for now, I'm going to click into the Exchange role. And of course, within Exchange, there are a number of sub roles that you can assign someone. So for example, if I wanted to give somebody the help desk role, but only that particular role or that particular task for, let's say, 2 hours. So, and I can just put in a reason for the reason why I'm doing this. So I'm just going to say for testing purposes. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to go off and create that role. So now should anybody want to gain access to that role, off it goes, and it's now done. Now, depending on the task, you can automatically approve. You can, again, depending on the task or the role or whatever you've set up. So that Oslo team would get notifications. They would then go into manage that policy and either accept or reject it. And that's it, essentially. Really, really simple and really granular way to give just enough access, but just in time. For my number 3 tip, I definitely have to come back here into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. And this is the 365 Defender Admin Center. And I'm going to come into Secure Score. Now, I have covered this previously, and it's amazing how many people don't know about this and don't implement it. But Secure Score is not only a great way of improving your security posture, but also comparing your kind of score with your industry peers. So what we have here, we have the Secure Score dashboard, and you've got overview, improvement history, or actions history, and then you've got general trends at the moment. Now you can see here that we've got a score here of 37%, and it's showing me that I've got 46 to 49 out of a possible 125 points. So it's okay, but I feel that we could do better. Now you can see that we also have a number of different categories. You've got apps, you've got identity, and so on, and you can customize that if you want to. Now, the important thing that we have here is not only your score, but you can also get a number of recommendations here. And you can either get those here, or you can go into recommended improvement actions. And you can see that recommendation number 1 is always ensure that you've got MFA for admin roles. Okay, now to implement this, or to implement any features or things like, hey, do you want to create a safe links policy or turn on safe attachments? How do you want to implement this? So for example, what I can do is I can click on to the option here. It tells you a little bit about the feature, and it also tells you how to implement it, and it shows you which users, if any, would be affected by this. All right, and more than that, it shows you how many points that you can gain. Now, the one thing about Secure Score is, and you might be interested in this, every year Microsoft have a Secure Score competition, and it basically involves companies like yourselves enforcing or creating a scenario where you have the highest workable score, where you're making it still easy for your users to do their work. Because remember, good security should be invisible. So that's essentially what that is. Now, in terms of implementation, it shows you there are links here, shows you exactly how to get started. You've got step-by-step guides, and anything that you have done previously, you'll get a history of that. All right. So essentially, that is essentially how that works. Now, if you've got other users, or let's say a support team in your company, you can go ahead, you can email this to them, you can set it up in Microsoft Teams, you can share it in Planner, and you can even copy the link. So really powerful feature there. Now, you've also got a history, so anything that you've gone ahead and implemented. And finally, these are the trends. So this is where Microsoft are actually comparing your score with your industry peers. All right, and it shows you whether your score is improved or it's increased, or and so on. It shows you the trends. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is something you must take a look at. It can really help improve your security posture. For my number 2 solution, I'm going to come into users, and I'm going to come into active users in Microsoft 365. I mentioned that this was in my last video actually, and I cannot honestly put my hand to my heart and do a top 5 security feature set without having this in here. So this is multi-factor authentication. You can implement it in a number of ways. It's available in most Microsoft 365 plans and Office 365 plans, and in essence we essentially just select a user here. So I'm going to, let's say I've got a user called Diego, and Diego, I want to enable multi-factor authentication. So it's couldn't be more simple. Simply go in, enable multi-factor authentication for this user, and what will now happen, of course, is that the user will get prompted. They'll say, we need more information from you. The user can go in, they can set up multi-factor authentication. If they're using Windows Hello, great. If they're using a mobile device, let's say an iPhone, then they can download the multi-factor authentication app. Do remember that you don't have to just use the Microsoft one. You can also use the Google and Amazon ones as well. They're absolutely fine. So once you've done that, Diego will now have 14 days in which to register for MFA. Beyond that, his account would be disabled if he doesn't. One thing that you can do though is you can override that 14 days, and I can actually say, hey, I want to enforce that. So that means immediately configure multi-factor authentication. Now, when you consider the problems with passwords and password cracking tools, this is an absolute godsend. Just bearing in mind one thing, if you can also go to the service settings here, so if I just come up here into the service settings, you can skip multi-factor authentication for any requests in these locations. So if, let's say you've got different branch offices, London, New York, let's say Delhi, then you can put in the IP address ranges here and it will skip multi-factor authentication. Brilliant. How do you want to verify? So do you want to send a text message? Do you want to do a mobile app or a verification code from a, let's say, a hardware token? So you can give, essentially what this is doing, it's giving the users the choice. So it's giving the users the choice here. Now, you can see here, excuse me, you can also allow the users to remember multi-factor authentications on devices that they trust for X number of days. So 90 days, and you can decrease that. You can have it less if you want to. And that basically prevents user frustration. Okay. The other place to deploy multi-factor authentication is, of course, in Azure Active Directory's conditional access. Again, I've covered that in previous sessions, and I'll place a link in my description below if you want to go off and check out that video. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen, multi-factor authentication in Microsoft 365 is definitely my number 2. So I know what many of you are thinking. You're probably thinking, hang on a minute, Andy, surely MFA is the number one security thing that you can do to improve your security. And hands up, you're absolutely right. But I gotta say, this goes hand in hand with that. So I'm kicking off the demo here. I've come into Azure Active Directory. I'm going to come into the directory and I'm going to scroll down. Now, this particular feature you can't do from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. I'm going to come down to the security node here, and we're going to talk about this, authentication methods first up. Now, one of the big kind of things that Microsoft have been pushing in the last few year or so actually is the concept of passwordless authentication. So rather than using MFA, which is great, you know, it's very good, but you can also add in something that you are and something that you physically have. So, for example, if you're using Windows Hello for Business, of course, you can either push that out within your organization through Active Directory. And if you've got users just in Azure Active Directory, then you can push that out through Intune, of course. But there are some other really cool features here, and these include things like FIDO keys. So if you're using these new kind of next-gen FIDO keys, which are like these hardware tokens, you don't need a username, don't need a password, really, really simple to set up. I'm going to do, in fact, I did a session on this previously. I'll bring you up to date and I'll do one in the future. So I can go ahead and say, yes, hey, I want to enable a FIDO key. Do you want to give it for all users or just specific users? So I can say, yeah, I want this to, let's say, go to Bianca. I'll say Brian. And I'm going to say, who else will we say? We will say Jean-Luc. I'm going to click on them. And I'm going to say, at the moment, it's optional, you know, so they can choose whether they want to use this. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll click on save. And that's it. Really, really simple to set up. if I just click on back into configure, you can choose allow self-service setup. You've got things like enforce and any key restrictions. If you want to remove any keys, you can remove those access as well. Okay, so that is definitely something that you want to take a look at. Of course, everybody knows the Microsoft Authenticator app. So again, I can select specific users or groups within my organization to deploy that. And of course, I can also, if you've got the capabilities, you can set up text messaging. And this is quite useful as well. If the user forgets their username and password or loses their mobile device, then you can issue what we call a temporary access pass. And this will force the user to re-sign up and recreate within MFA on a brand new device. So that's great in there. We also have the new certificate-based authentication. This is where you can deploy a digital certificate either to the user or to the user's device. So when the user signs in, they must have a valid certificate. And this replaces, is very, very useful for things like smart cards, which is something that we always struggled with in the past. So that's really nice to see that coming in here. Now, as well as the authentication policies here, there's a couple of other things that in fact, I'll just stay in there for a second. We also have some monitoring tools here. So for example, activity, and this will just give you kind of, how many of your users have registered. Maybe somebody started to register but abandoned it. Maybe they had problems. So this is really useful, and it will show you how the user is authenticated here. Now, I honestly can't talk about security top tips without going back into security here. And in fact, actually, let's go back into Azure AD. You must have a look here at the sign-in logs. Individual users, you can go to mysignins.microsoft.com and you can look at your own sign-in logs. And of course, what you're looking for is any, shall we say, unscrupulous activity. So you can see if I scroll down here, most of these sign-ins are successful, but what we're typically looking for is failures to sign in. So if there is a failure to sign in, it shows me who's coming in. There is a very good diagnostic tool here. So for example, if somebody is logging in, trying to steal your password, of course, we already know your username, it's your email address. And what hackers will typically try and do is they will try and hack in and obviously use your password. But of course, MFA and this passwordless authentication, this completely removes that threat, and it's absolutely brilliant. So the sign-ins show you where the user's coming in from, the IP address, the location, what device, what browser they're using, what authentication method they're using, and also, as always, if they're being hit by a conditional access policy. So just be familiar with those sign-in logs, and also, like I just mentioned in the security area, definitely think about either MFA or some of those other authentication methods. They will increase your security standing 1,000%. So there you have it, my top 5 security tips. I really hope you found that useful. If you did, I'd really appreciate you hitting that like button, giving me a big thumbs up. It really does help my channel. So top 5 things, comments, questions, like anything like that, get them down below and I'll do my best to answer them, of course. And if you're not subscribed, go ahead, click on that subscribe button, ring the bell, and you won't miss out on any future postings. All right, so that's it for this week. I really appreciate you stopping by, and you stay safe, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy, and while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button and you won't miss out.